Squirrels know exactly, this is their playground. They don't have to think twice. They know exactly where all the holes are, okay? So the one went and ran down, and the bird caught it right around the back of the tree. I didn't see it because it was such a large tree, okay? But I assumed that he got it, which he did. And all of a sudden, the other squirrel takes off, takes to the ground, and follows the same pattern. And I go back there, and the bird had one squirrel in each talon.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and we're down to the last few episodes of the ones that I recorded with the New Jersey crew for all the initial dachshund episodes. There's still a handful more left. I know some of you are probably getting tired of it, but there's been also plenty of people that have requested more, and hey, it is what it is. I'm partial to the breed, and I hang around a bunch of other people that are too, and you have to get content where you get content. So for those of you continuing to enjoy these dachshund episodes, there's a handful more for you. For those of you that that are getting tired of it, hey, bear with me. There's still a lot of good stories and other aspects of people's falconry that are in these episodes too, but I appreciate you continuing to come along for the ride and have fun and for listening. So anyway, our guest for this episode is Mike Oettinger, and aside from talking about dachshunds and red tails, we talk about other stuff also, including experiences with apprentices and different odds and ends. So enjoy. Thanks again for listening, and here we go. Yeah, Mike, no, this is cool, man. Like I said, this has been a little bit of a busy few days, but I'm happy to have made it down here. You know, sure. Casey was talking a lot about you on the car ride down here and stuff, and yeah. So he was telling me that you do a lot of like landscaping and have kind of lived around this area for most of your life, or
yeah, 67. I'm 67, so
nice. So how long? Yeah, so you said you're 67, or you've been here since 67?
No, I'm 67 years old.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool.
93, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so, what does your typical day look like now? Are you retired? Or are you getting ready to retire? Or?
I'm getting ready to retire, but I think that all falconers realistically enjoy the outdoors and wildlife. I think that's a given. Like, in other words, one comes with the other. That's how they kind of got into it. And I work outside all day long, so even in the winter and stuff like that. So I observe nature from the outdoors, and I see a lot of what goes on outdoors. So I kind of, as I said, most falconers really enjoy the outdoors, and so that's kind of like what probably led them to get started in falconry. To some degree.
Yeah. And like you've been an outdoorsy, person ever since you were a kid?
Oh yeah. Everything outdoors. And my household, basically my parents, it was 8 kids in a small Cape Cod house. And like, even in the winter, my parents are like, go outside. Like, in other words, we don't want you in the house. Like, in other words, even in the winter, we were outside. Go outside. If you got a cold, the best cure is to go outside in the cold. So we spent a lot of time outside, and there was woods around our house. So we saw a lot of what was going on. And I think that's what kind of starts people towards enjoying the outdoors, is if that's how they grew up. In today's times, a lot of people today are probably playing video games, so they kind of might miss that whole thing. So it's sort of like you got to start habits when you're small, and being outdoors. That's what we did. We hunted, with slingshots and bows and arrows. We hunted, fished, and played sports all day long outside. And that's what gets you started in life.
So were all your siblings like that too? I know you guys were kind of forced outside, but did all your siblings want to be outside, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like, it's like right now, half of my family, we all got together and bought a big tract of land out in Pennsylvania with a lake, a private lake. That's how we basically, we all, enjoyed the outdoors, and we got together as we started to get older, and, we wanted to buy some land. And I grew up around where Casey lives, and the houses are all close together. So I decided to move here in New York, where you can get a couple acres of land and you can enjoy things. And as you see, I have structures all over the I have structures all over the place. I'm like even though I do landscaping, I'm basically a carpenter. So in the winter, I used to redo kitchens, bathrooms, and I do framing and stuff like that. So I could build a house from start to finish. So that's why you see all these structures. It doesn't take long for me to throw something together.
I mean, if you're really bored, you can come and fix up. You make a trip to Southern Indiana, man. We've been renovating most of our house and flipping it for the better part of the last 2 friggin' years. And I'm ready for that to be done. So if you just want, if you want to volunteer your services, if you're that bored or anything, you can just come down. You can stay down there for a week. I'll put you up, and you can go to town if you want, man.
Yeah, I'm getting old. My bones are getting old.
Well, I'm sure we could find you something to do that's not that awful hard on the old bones, though. I mean, whether it's just finishing some trim or some painting or whatever. I mean, if you're down. Like I said, I mean, I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. I don't have a construction bone in my body, so if it wasn't for people like yourself, there's no way I'd probably still be living in 1969. So,
well, in today's times, being 67, my brain doesn't work as well as it used to. But when I was growing up and stuff like that, the teachers in school insisted that I had a photographic memory, because I would be talking in school, and which actually isn't true. It's no such thing really as a photographic memory. It's just that the teacher would ask me a question, and I said the middle of a line, and I would read, like, say, I'd count it. I said, line 23, there's a misspelled word. And they're like, that's impossible. It's a school book. It's not possible for them to misspell a word. And I says, yes, it is. And they open up the book and they're like, holy mackerel, and that's like with houses. I could watch a house being built, and I can see where in my mind, see where every stud goes. And it's just that I can piece that together. That's just part of my makeup. So, I used to take apart car engines and put them together and stuff like that. And I just figured it out. It was just something that I would do. So, but as I said, now that I'm old, my brain doesn't work that well anymore. Anyway, so.
Well, I just turned 40, man. I mean, there's plenty of days.
You're still young.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of days, though, where it's like, you know how it is. You walk into the kitchen, and then 5 minutes later, you're like, why did I come into the kitchen? Yeah, I don't remember. It's like, then you got to, go back into the living room and okay, well, I was thinking about this when I was sitting on the couch, and, oh, yeah, okay. And then you walk back into the kitchen again, and you're like, I don't know why I came in here again.
Well, it gets worse. Believe me, it gets worse when you get older.
Well,
it gets worse.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting then. I mean, that's what people say, but I don't know. I think part of the problem too is a lot of times we occupy ourselves with so many different things, and we're always thinking about so much stuff, and something's got to be forced out.
Right.
I guess somewhere, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to falconry, we're always thinking about these birds and everything else that we would probably rather be doing than what we're supposed to be doing. And yeah, go back a little bit then. I mean, you alluded to it a couple times, being out in the wilderness and, kind of being out in nature and, getting kind of your initial interest. I mean, was there a particular, species or particular kind of hawk or anything that you saw that kind of got you initially interested in all this, or?
Yes. Well, first, originally, I saw an article in the paper about a falconer from New Jersey that talked about, falconry. And he said that in the article, he said that you had to have at least 1 hour each day to dedicate to falconry if you want to be a falconer. So I said, well, I can't do that because, I work 12-hour days. And I said that, basically, maybe when I retire, I could think about something like that. So I happened to see this book, and I ordered this book. And, basically, since I work outside, late in the fall, probably in December, I was blowing out the leaves behind the customer's foundation planting, and there was a dead Cooper's hawk. And it was frozen because it was starting to get cold. And the customer told me that sometimes the hawks chase the songbirds, and then they hit into the picture window, which was right above it. So we assumed that's what happened, and it probably broke its neck. But I noticed that like the intensity in the eyes of the Cooper's hawk. And I said, well, I was really impressed with that, how I'm like, wow, this is really, but anyway, so, when I moved to New York, I saw an article in the paper, about a falconer in town here. It was Tom Cullen. And I said, wow, I would like to meet that guy and, talk to him or see the hawks and things like that. But I said, for the sake of his privacy, I don't want to, you can't just look somebody up in the phone book and call them up and say, hey, can we talk about this? But it turns out that my son and his son were in class together, and they became friends. And my son was having Tom's son was having a sleepover. So basically, I dropped him off for the sleepover, and I brought this book along with the article from the newspaper. And, I talked to Tom, and Tom, of course, as falconers, they like to show, we like to talk about falconry. So he showed me his birds, talked to me about falconry, and he invited me to a pig roast at his house. But anyway, he gave me a New York State Falconer's study guide, which I studied quite a bit and learned about all the different things. So when I went to the pig roast, Heinz Ming was there, Mario from Long Island, and Ray Penna, who does, at the time, he was doing like, bird shows. And Ray flew his gyrfalcon, to the lure, and he also flew a kestrel to the lure. And I talked to him, and he said, I told him, I said, I'd like to do this, but I said, I don't have the time. And he explained to me that he used to do construction, and he said, this is something that's doable. So yes, I did. I took the test, and I got going with falconry, and I did a lot of trapping. I think I trapped a lot of hags. So my initial bird was the 13th bird that I trapped. And I was just trapping all hags. I made traps. I built the muse. It took a month to get the results of the written test because a woman that worked for the DEC had a death in the family or something, and so she took off from work for a while. But as soon as I took the test, I built my muse. And my wife says, "Why are you building the muse? You haven't even found out if you passed the test." And I said, "Oh, I passed the test." It took me like 10 minutes. I went in there, 100 questions, I polished it off, and 10 minutes later, I brought the test to Chris, and Chris was like, "You got a question?" I says, "No, I'm done." He says, "You're done?" So anyway, I studied really hard and stuff like that. So I got started, and basically, about the time that I started falconry, Paul and Philalia were at the same level as me. I think we started at the same time, and I met them, and because I worked down there, we kind of started to advance our falconry on the same level. We were into the same sort of things as new falconers. So we kind of worked it out together that, we all kind of went along the same path right about the same time. So they were close falconers with that, getting started with falconry.
Okay. And as far as timeline goes, like how many years ago was that then?
Well, I think I got my license 25 years ago.
Okay.
So it's roughly about that time.
Right.
I mean, I was interested in it before that, but that's when I actually took the test and got going.
Yeah, you just didn't have the time or the resources to dedicate to it until, when you're roughly, that age or whatever, a little bit later.
Yeah, I just had to meet. I didn't understand at the time with falconry, like when I talked to Tom Cullen, and I didn't understand that you could keep raptors. And then what I understood is that you can keep raptors under certain guidelines. So basically, Tom said, you got to get a license, you got to be sponsored and stuff like that. So he said, I'll sponsor you. And, every time I turned around, it was like something else. Like, in other words, first I took the New York test, and then basically I built the muse, and basically I had to get a small game hunting license. So I had to sit through, I think, 10 hours of hunter safety course. So I did that. And every time I did another step, Tom would say, "Okay, now you got to do this." And it was like, if I'd have known all right from the beginning, well, I don't think it would have changed my mind, but it was just like every time I turned around, it was another step. So there is different steps that you take and that you could eventually do it. But at that time, falconry was not that widely known. Now today with the internet, it's like everybody knows all about it and everybody wants to be a falconer. And I don't know if they do for the right reasons, because it takes a lot of time and dedication. And I don't know if people, and it's a hunting sport. So people have to kind of understand that. And I think some of the people in the club, like in New York, they feel that I'm, like, and I'm no different from a lot of hardcore hawkers that I know, that, it's a hunting sport. And, people are more interested in like, oh, well, this is a nice picture of this and that, but like they just didn't quite. I think I was scolded one time because they said that there's women and children on this group, and this is not suitable for those people. And I'm just like, well, then I think you're in the wrong sport, because the falconers that I know, that I associate with, are hardcore hawkers. Mm-hmm. And as Teddy has that motto, hunt hard, kill swiftly, waste nothing, offer no apology. Mm-hmm. This is and this is what it's all about. And basically, look, you do the best you can, be the best you can be. Yeah. At anything.
Well, and if you're, but kind of by definition of falconry, what kind of goes along with the hardcore hawker, like that also means really, in turn, you're really a hardcore hunter as well, because it is a hunting sport. And so, yeah, if people are going to get a little, queasy or, a little put or turned off by, a hawk with, taken prey, or something like that, then yeah, they might want to consider looking elsewhere.
That's it.
Yeah. That kind of pretty much what the picture was, and more or less words.
Yeah, I rehabilitate quite a bit, and I would be out there, like, say, trapping with a pigeon harness, and the pigeon would get kind of beat up, and I would rehabilitate the pigeon back, and I do quite a bit of, rehabilitation with animals and stuff like that. So basically, I think we really just, as I said, a lot of falconers are, enjoy the outdoors and animals and things like that. So they, we really just, it goes along with it. Do you, like, say, for example, okay, we eat beef or we eat chicken. Mm-hmm. Do you erase yourself from the fact that animal was raised and butchered for that purpose? You have to have that understanding that this is the natural part of things. Mm-hmm. It's not like, we can be vegetarians as much as we want or whatever, or something like that. But let's face it, we do eat beef and we do eat chicken, and somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to raise it and do it. And like, there was an example, is the guy across the street used to raise cows, and he used to have it butchered, and he'd say, okay, I have this one cow and it's like 250 pounds of meat, and it's so much a pound. So we used to, for a while, we would buy a butchered cow, and like my wife, who's funny about food, she would feed the rest of the family the butchered cow across the street, but she would buy her own beef from ShopRite, and it's like, it's the same thing. Yeah. Uh-huh. Like when my son was small, we stopped to visit one of my friends who lives up here, coming back from our place in Pennsylvania. And a raccoon or something had gotten into the chicken coop, and one of the chickens was dead, and there was an egg sitting there right next to it. And I said, oh, a raccoon. My friend said, yeah, it was a raccoon. And I saw the egg, and I pointed out to my son, who was like, I don't know if he was 5. And I said to him, oh yeah, and look, there's an egg. And he said, Dad, eggs are made at ShopRite. I said, no, eggs are from chickens. So basically what we did was we bought an incubator with, I think, 4 quail eggs. And we hatched the quail eggs to show him that basically this is where they come from, because his idea was eggs are made in ShopRite. So that was a lesson learned, about that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it is important for sure for people to be educated about all of these different things. And yeah, I think there is, kind of like you were saying, there's a great degree of disconnect and naivety, I guess you could say, when it comes to where some people, what some people think really happens in nature. And, there's a lot of also anthropomorphizing in a lot of ways with animals. And, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is nature's not nice, and it's
true.
And there's a lot of things that happen every day that we don't normally witness. And I think a large degree of the appeal of falconry for most of us falconers, though, is that we are getting that front seat show, to be able to see these things that are happening that not everybody always gets to see, which unfortunately, yeah, it's kind of a pity that some things have to die so that other things can live. But that's, once again, that's biology, that's nature. And, it just so happens that we enjoy seeing the action of these hawks and falcons and these raptors doing that very thing. I mean, it's mesmerizing. And, it's, for me, I mean, a lot of people, yes, they, take game and stuff. Yes, everybody wants, I mean, that's the whole point of falconry. It's hunting and taking game and whatever. But it's not that I know for me personally, it's not that I take any joy in seeing another life taken. But what I really get a joy out of is seeing, everything that happens in between and, up to that end result. And I think that's where the magic is in a lot of this for us. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
Well, like my oldest son is also a falconer. And like in the beginning with falconry, a lot of falconers, at least in this area, we tend to hunt squirrels because these are something that we can see. And then, you don't, like, I work outside and like I'll flush 20 rabbits a day, just blowing off and working a mower around different places. So basically, a lot of falconers, they don't see rabbits as much. So I think in this area, a lot of new falconers start out, hunting mostly squirrels because these are the things that you could see. But like say, for example, my oldest son, when he first started in falconry, we used to catch squirrels all the time. Then when we started hunting rabbits, I could tell with his behavior that, see, like a squirrel is quiet when it gets caught, whereas a rabbit, in a lot of, not always, but in a lot of cases, will scream. So I could tell that he was a little sensitive to the scream of the rabbit. I could tell, but anyway. So, but that's the thing, like I said, that's the thing with a dog. Like, in other words, when I started hunting with. We had one year where, for some reason, there was not a very good mast crop, and there weren't very many squirrels, and we didn't take a lot of squirrels. And you wanna hunt something because you want to keep your bird. Like what I can do in the winter is what a lot of people can't do. I can go out and hunt every single day. And I can hunt all day if I want to. So basically, what I found was that, like, this, you want your bird to be successful. So, like, basically, it's not good for the bird to go out every day and not catch stuff. So I make it my responsibility to work hard and flush game. But anyway, so like this one year we didn't have very many squirrels, and I said, what am I going to do? And I was out hunting with Teddy and Paul and Philalia and with the dogs, and we were putting up rabbits. And I said, see, that's what I have to do. I have to diversify so that I could, take game. And, we went from, like, say, 90% squirrels to 10% rabbits to all of a sudden, like, the next year we were like 75% rabbits and 25% squirrels with the dog. So it's important to, the dog was just a great help. And it but I feel that, like, a dog compared to a red tail, I'm not talking to a goshawk or something else, but red tails to me are easy to train up. they train up. They're very forgiving and stuff like that. Whereas like training a dog the right way was much more work than training a hawk. As I said, I'm talking about a red tail. A goshawk depends on the situation, could be different, but to me, it was a lot of work to do it and to do it right. So I spent a lot of time with the dog doing it right, and the rewards were great because we basically, and I know in the beginning, I know sometimes the dog would be following the trail backwards. And, Paul or Phil said, yeah, after like by the first season, they start to get they start to figure out which way it went. So but it is a lot of work with a dog. There's that extra responsibility in the field. Like sometimes you run into a situation. I was in a situation where I had the dog, and I had a cast of Harris Hawks at the time. I was hunting them, and one of the Harris Hawks grabbed a squirrel flew way across the field and grabbed a squirrel in somebody's backyard. And I heard all this screaming, and I'm like, I want to get to see what's happening. But then I have the dog over here. So it was like, it's an extra responsibility sometimes, a lot of times. So I eventually had to get back over there, and, the people called the police, and they called the DEP, the DEC, and like basically the DEC, they were on the phone for an hour, and then, they said to me, he says, go sit in your, motor vehicle. And they finally, after an hour, they came back to me and they says, we got it all ironed out. Everything's fine. So like that's that. But it is that extra burden of responsibility. And it's also, I've been with, different falconers a couple times, and like, they're like, oh, my dog's the best, this and that. And we're out there hunting in a group, and all of a sudden he's like, how come my dog is following you and this and that? And I said, well, the hawks, a lot of times the hawks will realize who's flushing the game, and they're smart, and they'll figure it out, and basically they'll stay with that particular person because they see things, and so it's a lot of work with a dog, but it's very rewarding and it's worth it.
Let's go ahead and stay on the subject of dogs then, because that's a big reason why this series is happening.
Right.
And I think we should be more specific too and say, dachshunds, correct?
Right.
I just started running dachshunds myself. And after meeting Teddy and, kind of getting into this world a little bit more, I was kind of inspired to put together, this string of episodes that incorporate a lot of falconers that use these dogs as part of their hunting teams. And as far as these dachshunds, how have you really been incorporating them like for so many years? And how many years have you been using them?
Okay, so my dachshund died a year ago. He was 17 and a half. Mm-hmm. So basically, one of the downfalls of my dachshund was that when he was about 12 years old, he wandered over into the neighbor's property. We had a new neighbor, and he slid through the slots of their fence, and they had a dog. They had just moved in recently. My dog should not have been over there. I was working on a construction project in the driveway, and the dog was with me, and all of a sudden I heard yelping. So I immediately ran over there, and the dog had him by the belly and ripped him wide open. Was shaking him. He was shaking him. And basically, the neighbor was fortunately outside, and he went over and he jumped on his dog, and he had him his dog in a chokehold. And I took the dog to the vet, and basically everything was ripped. Everything was out. So basically, they were surprised that he did survive, but he was a tough dog, and basically that kind of ended his career because even though he recovered, he would drag his one back leg, and But he still liked to go out. I would take him out once in a while, but I just didn't want him to wear out his body because his back specifically because of that. Mm-hmm. So, but the other thing too is like we had a Beagle Shepherd mix when we got the dachshund, and I said to the kids, my 4 kids who were, younger at the time, I said to them, now this is a hunting dog. This is not going to be like our other pet dog. Well, the dachshund was more of a pet than the other dog. He loved people. We encouraged him every time he saw somebody to greet them. So he loved people, and his tail was always going. And like he basically, he loved to hunt. And like what would happen is, like when we got done hunting, I would take my sweatshirt and I'd put it on this chair, and he would go right on that chair and he would sleep on that chair. Okay. Because it reminded him of the hunting. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was that, if I went away, which is rarely, I went away, basically for, the weekend, the dog would be whining and looking for me. And my wife says, your dog. Unfortunately, if my wife was mad at me, the dog was in trouble. That's the way it goes because it's my dog. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I said, well, just take like a T-shirt out of the laundry basket of mine, put it on the chair, which she would do. And he would get up on that T-shirt and that would quiet him down because he just loved to hunt all the time. Every time, and it was just amazing. It's like one time I was working with a new hawk, and I said, I'm going down the street. I'm going to walk down the street and hunt down the street. And I said, the dog is going to want to go outside, but I said, do not let him outside because he's going to fake you out. He's going to pretend he has to use the bathroom. And sure enough, I'm way down, a half a mile down the end of the street, and all of a sudden I hear a dog open up and a rabbit busts out, and I'm like, whose hunting dog is that? It was my dog. And when I got home, I said to my wife, I told you not to let the dog out. And she says, well, he had to go to the bathroom. I said, no, he faked. But he actually followed my trail. And that's what these dogs, it's incredible, the nose on a dog. I mean, all dogs have some sort of a nose. But the dachshunds, like, I was just amazed that, like, a lot of times we'd be hunting and the dog would follow a trail and he'd be scratching at like a fieldstone wall in the ground. And I'm like, and I would pull a couple rocks away, reach my hand down there and pull out a rabbit. Like that's what their nose is just, it's incredible. And a lot of times when you're hunting with, like for me, hunting with the dog, you're not even really concerned about the hunting of the hawk catching something. You're more impressed with the dog work. So you just basically start to enjoy the dog work. And it's like, you could almost forget about the hawk. I mean, you're really interested in good dog work. Like that's what it's all about is good dog work. And, when you see good dog work, you notice it. And so one of the funny stories was, I met up with a bunch of falconers down in New Jersey, and Teddy was there, Brian Bradley was there, I think the Elias were there, and basically it was a bunch of other falconers, and there were 13 dogs. Now, most of these dogs never met each other before, but they all had one thing in mind, to go out and to hunt. There was no squabbling with 13 dogs that never met each other before. They all had one thing in mind. So there was a huge pile of concrete blocks that somebody had dumped. This was out in the woods, and all 13 dogs were all over this big mountain of block, and so there was a rabbit in there. So I had put my bird up first. And normally, if there was just a few dachshunds, I don't think that the rabbit would have busted out. But when you had 13 dogs all over this big pile of concrete, there was enough pressure. And all of a sudden, the rabbit busted out and ran up this steep hill. And all 13 dogs in a row, all yelping, ran up the hill after this rabbit. And my bird, who was in a tree at the top of the hill, flew down and grabbed the rabbit. But then he looked and he saw 13 yelping dogs running at him, and he decided to let go of the rabbit and fly up into the tree again, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that? 13 dogs all barking in a line, running right at you.
Yeah.
So that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But it's just incredible, the nose and how they can do that. It's just unbelievable that they, and as you know, as we talked about, beagles have a really good nose too, but you can't control the beagle as well as the dachshunds. So, you know, I mean, the dachshund, you know, so much of the time, and I you know, Teddy really, and, you know, I going hunting with Teddy, she really enjoys the dog work. And I think Teddy like pioneered, you know, dachshunds for this. And like Teddy would just, you know, she's would only wants to breed the best with the best. So she strives to be, because, you know, there's different, I guess, different qualities of different dogs. So you really want to, you know, Teddy had bred my dog Midnight with you know, one of her dogs a couple different times. One of the problems though was that for whatever reason, when she bred my dog with this other dog of hers, all the puppies were always males. And like she says, you know, a lot of people want the smaller females. You know, for the tunnels and things like that. So that was the thing. And it's kind of weird because when I bred him with other dachshunds, a lot of times we had a mix of 50-50. But for whatever reason, it just was strange that they were always all males. And that was like, you know, that was not a desired type of thing, you know. But, and another time was somebody brought their dachshund over. It was in heat. And basically, we bred them with my dog, and they went home and they called me up and they said, my neighbor's Jack Russell Terrier just mounted my dog. And I was like, oh man. So, you know, like the dog was bred twice in one day. And like, you know, so like, and Teddy being the committed person that she is, she said, do not AKC register those puppies because we don't know. We don't know what they really are. Yeah, that just shows her dedication to it. So basically, you know, so those puppies were never, you know, AKC registered. You know, but it's like you really want to breed the best with the best, and you know, work with them and try to really get a good dog and perfect the line. And that's what Teddy does. She wants to perfect that line. You know, she wants to get like, you know, basically a really good dog. And as I said, we bred our dog with somebody else's, and the little girl next door, when she was 12, she used to like to come over and play with our dog. And she wanted a dog, but her parents wouldn't let her. So one of the times when we bred our dog, we got to pick of the litter, and we gave it to the neighbor. And the neighbor said, well, that's okay because you're giving it to her. So one of our neighbors has one of our dog's puppies. This was about maybe 8 years old, you know, 8 years ago. So, you know, one of the neighbors there has our, you know, one of the puppies. But they're such good dogs, the personality. Like my kids all have a bunch of different dogs and things like that. But I really, you know, I enjoy the qualities of a dachshund, the good temperament. And to me, you know, a lot of people have a dog and they don't train it and they don't really discipline the dog or anything like that. But to me, like a working dog has a purpose. And to me, that makes it a much better pet, if you want to call it that.
It's more well-balanced.
Yeah. 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 Like, I mean, you know, there's so many people. I talk to people and they have different kinds of dogs and they're like, oh, I want my dog to be like mean. And I'm just like, no, you don't want the dog to be mean. You know, you could have like, I remember when I was a teenager and we went to visit a friend who had moved, and the people had two beagles that they used for hunting, and they had them chained out on the front lawn. This was the house next door. And we were petting the dogs, and the wife came out and she said to me, says, you can't pet those dogs. They're hunting dogs. You'll ruin them. And I'm just like, and having, you know, had the dachshund, I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. You could have a dog that's got a good temperament and is a good friendly dog without, you know, and show it attention and affection, you know, like, I mean, they're that's all part of it. That's got nothing to do with a hunting dog. Doesn't have to be a mean dog. So it's it's a breed that I really enjoy the temperament of the breed.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions then. I've been asking these couple questions pretty consistently throughout this series because it's kind of it's for my own curiosity, and I'm sure it's going to help people listening to this determine whether or not, this breed is really for them or not and stuff also. But basically, I've been asking all these guys that run dachshunds, all these guys and gals that run dachshunds, I've been asking them what their opinion is, basically, since you've also bred, dogs and stuff too. When you think the best time is to bring a puppy home, a dachshund puppy home, and also the housebreaking aspect of things, because the thing that's the most notorious downside with dachshunds is just the almost impossibility of being able to completely housebreak them. What are your thoughts on both of those things?
Okay, so we never had as far as the proper age, I really can't say for sure. I'll leave that to people that know that better. But it is true that they do. And it's not just dachshunds, it's smaller dogs have a tendency to do things like that. And all I can say is we never had a problem with our dog. We basically, we reprimanded him if like when he was first small, but we never really had a problem with our dog. We had a few issues with him when he started to get really, really old, like when he was 17. I think the last 3 or 4 months of his life, part of the problem was that his bladder was torn and it was stitched. So his bladder was not full size, perhaps. So he had trouble making it through the night. So we started crating him at night, but he would howl around 5 o'clock in the morning. And I usually get up a little bit after that. But even on weekends, I made a point I would have to get up early. So the last 3 months of the dog's life were kind of, hectic. He would start to, he would howl when we went out, like when he was home alone. And he never did that through his younger. It was just a lot of work, extra work, the last, say, 3 months of his life. And he reached that certain point. And I think that his back would have held out a lot longer had he not had that issue when he was attacked. So basically, but the last couple months of his life were kind of rough with him. And we finally reached that point and, it was time. But they are typically, problematic small dogs.
So you didn't really have any issues with him, like marking or just any of the other general housebreaking issues? I mean, I've talked to so many people about this so far, and I know from what I've heard is pretty consistent with my experiences in that sometimes they just don't want to go outside. Sometimes they'll come back in and just, randomly, go inside and, some of these other frustrating things because they're so headstrong sometimes and different things like that. But
yeah, it was sometimes when it was like, let's just say it was wet out or there's snow on the ground, he was a little bit more reluctant to go out. But all you would have to do is say, a squirrel. And he was out the door. And matter of fact, it was like, you don't really need a dog for hunting squirrels, but he would get so worked up over squirrels more than rabbits. Like if he saw a squirrel in a tree, he would go absolutely crazy. Matter of fact, a lot of times the squirrel would bail out of the tree and the dog would catch him. So basically what had happened was I was working with a new, really big red tail and in the backyard on the crayons, and the dog wandered off and he comes walking back. He caught a squirrel and he's got the squirrel by the neck and it's dangling. And all of a sudden the hawk went right after the squirrel and the dog. And all of a sudden after that, we had problems. Like, in other words, he started, this is what I happen to notice is that a really big red tail will have a tendency to be rough on the dog sometimes. It takes a little time to acclimate. to be honest with you, I mean, like, so I go out with the guys a lot of times, with the goshawks, and they're flying off the glove. And it's like, to me, I like to go out with the red tail, put the bird up, and be able to beat the brush myself along with the dog, and basically go and and hunt that way. And it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like, why do I have to be carrying a hawk around on the glove? And the other thing, the other advantage too, is that, like, a lot of times there'll be a flush, and like if I was flying the red tail off a glove, I wouldn't have got that rabbit. Whereas if the rabbit's up there, 9 times out of 10, you got a better opportunity. Not just because it's just because they're slamming crazy, a big red tail will just crash brush like nobody's business. And like, so what I used to do is, when I first started out in falconry, I had a cast of Harris hawks and I had a red tail. And basically, what I would do is I would hunt the Harris hawks. I worked with a lot of goshawks, but I never really had one for a long amount of time. But one of the things, I kind of compare the flight style of a Harris hawk a lot to a goshawk in certain aspects. So basically what I would do is I would hunt the Harris hawks in more open fields, whereas I would hunt my red tail in thicker cover because the red tail was a better crasher. So I found that, to utilize my hunting spots better, I would hunt the red tail in my thicker spots, and the Harris hawk kind of like the goshawk, where it could have a nice long flight. So basically, like, so that's the way I used to, break up my hunting spots, so that, that would work out the best with the equipment that I had. So, but yeah, I mean, like, and the other thing too is that, I feel that a tiercel red tail is a really good rabbit hawk. Like, I mean, when it comes to squirrels, I would go with a big female. And at one time I had a female was probably the best squirrel hawk I ever had, a female red tail. And at the same time I had a tiercel red tail, and he was probably the best rabbit hawk. So basically, but for whatever the heck reason, this particular female had a lot of trouble with rabbits. And he also wanted to hit the dog. But I couldn't understand that, because I watched him fly down squirrels, and like, I'm saying, why can't he do that with rabbits? But the thing was, a lot of times when he got a rabbit, it was all pulled, you could tell he didn't grab it right. Like, it was a lot of, fur removed from the backside and things like that. So then, at that particular point, I said, I want a bird that can do both. So I got rid of both red tails, and I worked with a couple other red tails after that were good at both. But for whatever the heck reason, at that particular time, I had, this female that was really good with squirrels, but not so good. And I flew that tiercel on squirrels, for two seasons before I got the dog. And he wasn't a great, he did okay, but he was not a great squirrel hawk. So once I got the dog, yeah, in the beginning he hit the dog a couple times, but he basically, once he got the knack of it, I mean, I basically, and we don't have a lot of rabbits in this particular area, and he averaged 2 rabbits every outing. I mean, sometimes there was times that he got 4 rabbits, but basically he got really, really good. And I should have kept him, but what happened was a raccoon ripped a hole in the top of the flight pen, and he escaped. And basically, 3 weeks later, I went to feed the other birds, and he came back down to the glove, and I put him back in the cage in his mews. And then I said, you know what? He was free for 3 weeks. Let him go. So regrettably, that's what I did. I let him go. But basically, it was a great rabbit hawk. He was a great crasher. It was quick and everything else. So it's they're all different. The birds are all different, and but definitely, hunting with a dog is just, I mean, I've actually seen like a rabbit or a squirrel go into a fieldstone pile of stuff, and the dog is telling me, I saw him go here, and the dog is telling me he's here. And I'm just like, and I pulled a bunch of rocks away, and I'm not finding him where I thought he was. And then I go over to where the dog is and reach my hand down and pull the rabbit out. And I'm like, I know what I saw. Mm-hmm. But the nose of the dog is it's just incredible.
Well, it didn't necessarily have to be the same rabbit either, or whatever. Yeah,
because I pulled rocks away and I didn't find them where I thought he was.
Yeah.
So the other thing too that's a big problem with me is that I generally hunt by myself. When I go out hunting with a bunch of people, like when I go to like a falconry meet, I'm like, my bird's just not acting like it usually does. It's just because, he's just not. My birds have a tendency of not tolerating other people. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden they get an attitude. You know,
we're not used to all the other people being around.
So that's one of the things there.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I appreciate you sharing. Whatever opinion you have on those things, and I mean, the general consensus that I've kind of got as far as the age. I mean, there's been a couple guys that have said, kind of echoed your sentiment about. Leave it up to the breeder or whatever as far as, how old they need to be. But I mean, a lot of guys have kind of, and some other people that I've talked to have been, kind of like 10 to 12 weeks, somewhere around there and stuff too. I've heard not just with dachshunds, but, you kind of mentioned just small breeds in general. I've heard that's also kind of a good time frame for a lot of smaller breeds because they sometimes need a little bit more time with mom and stuff to learn and, do different things and whatever. But I mean, everybody's got different opinions on those things. But anyway, like I said, I don't think there's any kind of magic formula as far as the other issue, just from what I've gathered so far. But yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to a lot to the individual dog and stuff too, whether, they're going to follow, and listen as far as the house training and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, like I said. And then, you've got people like Teddy too, that just like, well, they're just not going to be in the house.
Well, Teddy keeps them outside. Yeah. Well, part of the agreement when I got my dog was that they could take him whatever they wanted to do, field trials and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And like also that I didn't get the dog fixed. And I was like, gee, every other dog or cat we ever had, we always got him fixed. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I noticed is that like my son's dog is a male and my daughter has a male and a female. And like they both all come here and there's no issues. But then all of a sudden, the male and the female are playing around on the floor. And then later that night when my daughter took her dogs home and the male was here, not the dachshund, her beagle, he's peeing a line of, I'm like, I just cleaned it up and then he does it again. And I'm like, this has got to do with the male and the female. He's marking. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the part of what it was. It's something sometimes has got to do with that. But I think, like I said, I always had all my animals fixed and stuff like that, and it's like, but when they're not fixed, then things could happen,
Yeah.
And
I think that's a common denominator too. I mean, most of the people that I've talked to, I mean, their dogs are intact and, are being bred or have been bred or whatever. I mean, both of my males are intact just in case, we ever want to stud them out at some point or whatever also. And, so I'm sure that's probably got something to do with it too, but I don't know.
I think one falconer that I know, he's got like a band that when he's at work.
Yeah,
he puts some sort of band around.
I do that with both of my males too. I put belly bands on them.
Yeah,
and I put like line it with a maxi pad to absorb the urine and stuff. And because both of my dogs mark, they try to.
But that's what I can't, I can't tolerate. Like to me, is that like my daughter just moved to a different house, and all of a sudden her one female dog is peeing in the house, and it never did that before, and it's doing it. It's not just peeing, it's doing both every single day. And I'm like, when the dog stays here, I have no problems. The last house was no problems, but all of a sudden, but then you kind of wonder, like the people that owned the house before they got there, like the downstairs still has the same carpeting. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's those scents in the carpeting.
Yeah, and good luck with that. You're going to almost have to completely get rid of the carpet to fix that.
Well, it's like the family room. Mm-hmm. So when when the original carpet got shabby, we put new carpet on, and then we always said when the dog passes away, we're going to put new carpeting, but there's no point in doing it now. I just have to keep shampooing that carpet all the time. But I know underneath it's stained, okay? So then finally, the dog passed away, and I said, okay, it's time to pick new carpet. And my wife says, well, I want hardwood floor. So I ended up putting a hardwood floor down. I says, I thought we were going to do carpeting, but yeah, because carpeting could be, a problem, because the later part of our dog's life, he had more if you want to call them accidents than ever before. Yeah.
Oh, and that's understandable, though. Those are other mitigating circumstances. But we just, we got rid of all of our carpet and went into, like the waterproof tiling type stuff.
Yeah, they do have waterproof now. Yeah, that's getting very popular.
Yeah, those waterproof tiling type deals or whatever. That's what we've put in our house, and so that's one less thing you're going to have to do when you come and work on my house some more. Later, you won't have to worry about doing the flooring; it's already done. But. So
there's another topic I know we didn't mention and stuff like that is that one of the things that I found is that I used to hunt a lot around wooded areas around say malls and things like that. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's an irresponsible thing. But then there's one wooded area behind a mall. There's a whole big strip mall, and there's a large mall, and one season we got we found this place at the end of the season, and we got about 60 rabbits out of there. The next year I go back there, and I see all these cat shelters, mm-hmm. and we flushed 4 rabbits and we got 2. The next time I went there, we flushed 2 rabbits and I got 1. The next time I went there, I got 1, and then I didn't see no rabbits no more. And it's one of the things that I found is that, when people have these wild cats and they feed these wild cats, they kill baby rabbits.
Yep.
And that's a really big problem. So another thing was that I had this really big red tail, and I saw her. I thought she had a squirrel, but the way she was, and sadly, by the time I got there, it was a huge black cat. Mm-hmm. And I managed to try to get the cat away from her, but the more the game struggles, the more determined they're going to do. Mm-hmm. I did finally get it out, and I slipped it in my pack, and then I managed to slip it in my game bag, and then a while later, it perished. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I realized that my cat actually bit the tongue out of it. He got the tongue out of it.
You mean red tail?
The red tail. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, okay. So, then, but prior to that, I was hunting, and my bird got a feral cat, and apparently got scratched or bit. And by the next morning it was dead.
Yeah.
The bacteria. Mm-hmm. And it's just so this is why the next time this other red tail, I said, I'm protecting the bird. I'm not interested in protecting the cat at this point because I know what it did to one of my other birds. So I want to, I want to protect the bird because it doesn't take much. And then I couldn't believe it. It was just but that's a big problem. It's I found this in other places. All of a sudden you go there and you find dishes and, these little shelters and things like that. And I always noticed that my dachshund, when he was out in the woods, he made a certain, opened up a certain tone when he was on cats. But I could always tell, I'm sorry, when he was on rabbits, but I could always tell when he was on a cat because he had a different bark, a different tone to him. And I'm like, that's a cat. Mm-hmm. It's not a rabbit. That's a cat. He's on a cat, and so that's the thing. And, the other thing too is those things have, so many times we had groundhogs out in the yard and that dachshund would tear that groundhog apart like nobody's business. And I'm like, big groundhog, and it's that little dog can really put up a fight, against it. For some reason, they have this hatred of groundhogs, and it was like
they don't like moles very much either.
Yeah,
moles.
Yeah, they get things like that too. They take them and shake them and stuff like that. They find them. But it's definitely, it's a responsibility, but it's also a great benefit if you do it right. Now, I know falconers, like you read about falconers in other areas, like somebody, I think there was a guy used to post out in Kansas. He didn't need a dog because he would go out in a day with a Harris hook and catch 12 rabbits without a dog.
Yeah.
Here, it's absolutely a bonus. And it's almost like necessary to that point. Yeah. And I learned from the dog what rabbit territory there is. I learned from watching the dog flush rabbits for 12 years exactly where the rabbits are. So, I mean, I could drive down the road, like go to a meet or whatever, and like, that's where I want to hunt the birds. I learned from the dog, so even though right now I'm not hunting with the dog, I know exactly. But the other big problem is we're losing in this area, in spite of the fact that there's a lot of open land here, we're losing hunting spots. And for whatever reason, I mean, I look at, it's sad to say, I drive by a lot and I go, I remember that spot was good for 30 or 40 rabbits a year. And it's not there. They're not there anymore. What happened to them? I don't know. I wish I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of areas in the Midwest that people could benefit, for sure from this particular breed in general, because I mean, there's lots of briar, there's lots of cover, and there's larger breeds that can, kind of cover a lot of ground, but they can't get into the cover. Your bigger breed's not going to be as apt to get into briar and everything else, and all that kind of stuff. Even beagles, I mean, they're not really going to, get all the way into, huge briar patches and stuff like that or whatever. And so, I totally see what you're saying. It's a big reason why I went ahead and got a couple of them. But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of benefits, and I know that that's a big thing for you all here. And that's a big reason why, a large part of this series is taking place here. I mean, why so many of you all run them here. I mean, they're definitely important and an important part of the team, but yeah, I mean, as far as everything else goes, though, I mean, I think now would be a good time to, I mean, you've already told some pretty good stories and stuff, but I mean, is there like a particular, hunting story or experience, otherwise it comes to mind that's one of your more memorable ones, or?
Well, one of the biggest accomplishments, like it's one thing to go out and, have a good day and maybe get, 3 or 4 rabbits or 3 or 4 squirrels in a day, but so one of the funny stories was I had this really big red tail, and there was 2 squirrels up in the tree, and the one took to the ground and ran around the back of this huge oak tree, and at the bottom of the oak tree was a hollow. And squirrels know exactly, this is their playground. They don't have to think twice. They know exactly where all the holes are. Okay. So the one went and ran down, and the bird caught it right around the back of the tree. I didn't see it because it was such a large tree, okay? But I assumed that he got it, which he did. And all of a sudden, the other squirrel takes off, takes to the ground, and follows the same pattern. And I go back there, and the bird had one squirrel in each talon.
And didn't get bit or anything?
Didn't get bit. So I kneeled on one, and I, used
squeezed the other.
I squeezed the other one, and then basically, did the other thing. But it was just amazing to have 2 at the same time. And like I said, because the second squirrel must have ran around the back of the tree, and all of a sudden, like, whoa!
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome.
Like, whoa! Were
they both grays?
Both grays.
Yeah. I was going to say that would have been probably a little bit hairier if it was a fox or 2 foxes or something, or even a gray and a fox. It might have been. See, we don't have the fox right here. And the red squirrels are kind of quick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, quicker. From what I understand, I think down south, the grays are a little bit smaller, maybe. Yeah, and I mean, it's almost kind of like how cottontails are. Different parts of the country, they're either bigger, smaller, whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's certain areas further south where the squirrels there aren't quite as big. And
So one of the spots that I still hunt there. Actually, there's a lot of rabbits there now. But anyway, so there's one spot a lot of hunters used to hunt there, and at the time I was like, these cottontails are so much bigger at this one spot, and they just don't have the wildness to it. So basically, I think there was that hybrid that was it the Himalayan or San Juans?
oh yeah, there's different.
So I think that hunters that used to frequent there a lot actually released this other type of rabbit there. And every once in a while I would catch one of those, and I would feel really bad for that rabbit because it was a lot like the pet rabbit that, we've had rabbits from time to time here. And so basically what happened was when I first got the dog and I wanted to train the dog, I didn't have a rabbit, but I borrowed one from a rehabber. Well, one night it got sprayed by a skunk. And I ended up giving, it was no use to me anymore at that point, so I ended up giving it back to the rehabber, and I said, sorry, man, it's just, I don't know why, but last night a skunk sprayed it in the cage. I don't get it, but that's, that's what happened,
It's funny. No, that's a cool story with the two squirrels. I don't know of many, hardly anybody that's ever gotten two squirrels on the same slip before. That's right. Awesome.
Like I said, yeah. So, sometimes you do this or that, but it's but we don't have we don't really have an abundance of catchable game here. Mm-hmm. So you really got to work hard and you got to do your homework. And that's why, like a couple years ago, all these squirrels were all getting run over in the street in September. Everywhere you go, there was squirrels being run over everywhere. There was no acorns that year. So the mass crop failed, and they sensed that, and they were all traveling, and they were getting hit. I would go from New Jersey home, and one day I counted 30 run-over squirrels on the highway, no less. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how did they even come out this far, So it's you really want to diversify. That's why, the whole thing about, hunting rabbits with the dog and
gives you more options.
Yeah. Because let's face it, you want to build confidence with your hawk. And there are falconers out there that I know they go out there and they light up a cigarette and they're not flushing. Mm-hmm. To me, look, you owe it to the bird to hunt it. It's not just the fitness that the bird gets from hunting every day, but it's the confidence that if you bring it to the best places, you get your places, and then you go and that goes a long way with a bird that, so typically, so for example, when the tiercel that I turned out to be a really good rabbit hawk, I used to hunt it at I do ounces with red tails, but everything else I do, accipiters, I do grams. It's just the way I started. The way I started in falconry was red tails or ounces, So, but everything else I do grams. So it's I'm going back and forth with that. But anyway, so I used to hunt that bird around 35 ounces on squirrels. And when I finally got him going really good on rabbits, I found that I could fly him 38 ounces. Mm. They understand that squirrels, there's a bite factor.
Yeah.
There's more of a thing that could happen.
Yeah, danger.
Yeah. There's more danger with a squirrel. So I know a lot of guys do okay with a tiercel red tail on squirrels, but I always found with a smaller red tail on squirrels, it has to be really close to hunting weight. Mm-hmm. Whereas a female red tail, you can stretch it a bit, and they still. It's not that much of a, as much of a challenge. The other thing too is I have a 10-year-old red tail back there. She just loves rabbits. I don't know if she enjoys hearing a scream or what, but she would hunt rabbits, over squirrels anytime. She just loves rabbits. And, she does soaring. She'll, when you get a lot of snow here and the rabbits revert over to the cattail patches, and you get in those cattail patches, and she'll just sit right over me. Mm-hmm. She'll sit over me for an hour, just float right over me, just watching, and wait, because she realizes that's, and that's the thing with basically hawks is they're routine oriented. Whether anybody that's going to tell you any different is not telling you the truth. Hawks are routine oriented. There's a certain, whatever that routine is, that's what they follow. And if that routine happens to be that you're flushing game, that hawk will stick to you like your shadow.
Sure.
I'm not talking about a Harris hawk. I'm talking, another bird. Yeah. If you're flushing game, they will stick right with you if you're putting up game on a regular basis. Yeah. They're so much routine oriented.
Sure.
That's what it's all about with them. You know, I mean, but
well, I mean, as far as I think, like I said, we've covered a lot of stuff. Before we wrap, though, I mean, do you have any other a piece of advice or any other words of wisdom you want to pass along to falconers that might be that are listening to this, or even people considering getting into the sport or anything? Or
well, as far as getting into the sport, I think there's a lot of people today that I don't know. People would say, "Well, I'm thinking about it's like, well, see, I got Casey started. I don't know if you know. I got Casey started with falconry, and he's really into it. Okay, so the thing about falconry is you really got to be into it. If you're not, if you're only halfway into it, it's not going to work. And I mean, in my 30 years, I've sponsored 20 falconers. Okay, and half were good and half weren't. And the ones that were really not crazy into it, it didn't work out for them.
Well, let me stop you there real quick then and just ask, personally, I'm not saying regret, but do you wish that maybe you would have had a different, standard for what you looked for in prospective apprentices then? Or, do you think other people should, hold maybe a little bit higher requirement and what they expect out of people that want to get into this then? Or
I think I could say that I could blame myself partially but you want to give everybody the chance. And it's always a nice feeling several falconers that I sponsored became vets and followed up in that particular line. Okay. And then there's others that just plain kind of dropped out, and it's like you spend a lot of time trying to, make them the best that they could be. And then, they disappoint you. Yeah. So, you want to give everybody the benefit. And I kind of always feel good when somebody, accomplishes something out of it, so it's like, you take a chance, with people. And, I'm at that point now where it's like, I think I'm done. I just finished my last apprentice, and I think I'm kind of just going to sit back. The other thing too is that, we talked about this, Casey and I, we talked about this a lot, is that and Paul and Phil, is that a big part of being a falconer is, well, it's thinking outside the box, but it's also has to do with, you want to observe, you got to be able to understand the hawks or falcons and be able to pick up on what they do. And not everybody has that within themselves to do that. But the other thing too is a big part of falconry is trapping. There's a lot of us, I'm not going to mention any names. There's a lot of us that are addicted to trapping. Besides hunting and flying birds, there's a lot of us that are, addicted to trapping. That's, it's unbelievable, how much trapping we do, but goes along with it. Part of it is, but you got to be able to understand the way that bird is thinking. And it's not everybody has that. And, one of the things is for example, a dog might be afraid of a young child. Okay. And it's sort of okay, But then I found that I think a lot, I might have sponsored, say, like a 17-year-old, a young man, okay? And like, I just don't feel that, it almost seemed like they didn't have the maturity to understand the hawk at that age. And they developed that later on. But it's almost like, there's a certain understanding, there's a certain maturity that goes along with it. That, when it comes to, understanding the bird. And, as I said, it's just, I have a habit. I could catch 4 head of game and trade the bird off the last piece and walk back to the truck, and my birds know the routine. They're going to follow me back to the truck. Okay. And that's routine. That's about routine. So basically, I don't have to carry a hooded bird back. They know the routine. I mean, I remember one time I went out with the 2 birds hunting, and I had to get something at the feed store. And when I got back, my dog ate the trade-off meat. Okay. While I was in the store, or I was in the feed store. So anyway, so I says, it's not a problem, because when I get done hunting, even if the bird doesn't catch anything, he knows that when he goes back to the giant hood, he's going to get a small tidbit. That's routine. And not that it matters, because I had 2 birds, and the one bird caught 2 things, and I had trade-off. It was not going to be a problem anyway. But that's just that's routine. And I think that's important, and the fact is that you want that bird to know that routine and know that what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that goes back to routine.
Yeah. So in other words, you just have to have the commitment, and you have to be all in to be able to really have the dedication, and really be able to figure out and approach things from the angle, make sure that routine is set, and basically establish that repetition and everything with the bird. And if you can't really do that, then it's kind of
well. It's also, I think, some people I seem to find is that a lot of people, the money's a little bit of an issue. Like, in other words, do they have all the money? And the other thing too is that I tell people is that my apprentices, that you don't have to get a receiver, but you got to get a transmitter. And I said, this way, if for whatever reason you lose that bird, we'll get that bird back, because, you got to understand that a bird is on the fringe. A bird at hunting weight is on the fringe. And I don't like to fly my birds fat a lot, but if my bird is a couple ounces overweight one time, we're going to get it done. It's routine. The flights might be a little bit more selective, but the point is that, it's like, you want that bird to, be as healthy as it could be. And if a bird is at hunting weight, or some people don't understand, they're just like putting that bird at hunting weight every single day, and it crashes. Yeah. So it's sort of like you want that, it's okay once in a while and almost regularly to fly that bird a little high sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. But some people don't understand. They said, well, this is my bird's hunting weight. I have to get it at that weight every time. And it's like, no, if a bird has been making kills every outing, it doesn't matter if the bird is a couple ounces high. But I've known the falconers that I've been with them, and I'm like, the bird's too high. You've been flying that bird too high for a week now. Yeah. Like, the bird he's not putting in the effort there, so it's sort of like, you definitely, there is the weight, but it's definitely, it's okay once in a while to do it, and it's a good idea once in a while to fly them a little bit high and things like that, Yeah. And then, of course, sometimes, I know, like with the kestrel, I had a kestrel, I have a kestrel who's an imprint, and basically I can get away with flying that bird high because it's an imprint. Yeah. And I think probably too with even, captive bred stuff, but they have different, there are different personalities. And, somebody once said, there's no such thing as bad birds, just bad falconers. There are sometimes birds that are not quite
not suitable for it.
There's birds that are not quite suitable, and it's nice to be able to be in that situation to recognize that and say, hey, I think
but like you said, to get to those points, you have to have the time and the dedication to figure all those things out and figure out the bird. And
I think falconry's it's as much about falconry as it is about common sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, there's certain characteristics and techniques that we use in falconry, but a lot of it really comes down to common sense.
Sure.
And not everybody has a lot of common sense.
Yeah.
So that to me, that's as much about falconry is as much about falconry as it is about common sense and thinking outside the box.
Yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing. I think that's a very good distinction to make. And yeah, I mean, you have to know how to think, and you have to be able to, logically and rationally reason. And yeah, I mean, some people just want to approach things, strictly from like a textbook almost kind of approach and things. And you can't approach every single bird the same way. And you just have to have those ability. You have to have the ability to logically kind of reason. And
like once you've done it like 100 times, say, okay, you realize, okay, so like, let's just say a lot of times I'll sponsor somebody and it's not really a local sponsorship. Okay. So, back in the day, we used to have to communicate by email. Now we can text. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like, I was there when the bird was trapped, and I've trapped hundreds and hundreds of birds. Mm-hmm. So basically, and I've kept in, I've watched other falconers. So I basically, my apprentice has a bird, and I have a certain idea in mind of what that bird's weight is supposed to be. And we go through the process, and, I give him I said, I want to hear from you every day. And we go through, how much did you feed him? I want you to feed him this much. What was the weight? And it's kind of like a computer program, because, a bird that's down to hunting weight or is lean is going to drop weight a heck of a lot faster than a bird that's fat. Mm-hmm. And just by, him telling me, this is how much I fed him, this is how much my bird weighed the next day, I know, as I said, you've done it 100 times. Yeah. I know exactly where that bird is going. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I've had a few falconers that I'm just like, all of a sudden things are going in reverse. And I'm just like, the hell's going on?
I mean, I know what you're getting at. Basically, it's like, it doesn't matter if some people try to do it 100 times, they still can't figure it out.
But they're like, but see, what's happening is they're bugging me, and they say, why isn't my bird doing this? And I'm just like,
are you listening or doing what I'm telling you?
I'm just like, it should be, it should be right. So I go over their house and I put the bird on the scale, and I'm like, you told me the bird weighed this much, and it weighs 4 ounces over what we trapped the bird at weight at. How did that happen? That didn't just happen. So, like, in other words, now it makes sense why the bird is not responding when we're going backwards. Yeah. And it pisses me off, because I'm just like, look, we're doing this together here, and like, you're supposed to be doing your part, and you're not doing your part, and like, all of a sudden, we're just like, no, like in other words, now I see exactly what's wrong. So I'm like, how did this happen? They said, oh, something wrong. They said, like, something's wrong with my scale. And I'm like, no, you're not,
you're not doing what I'm telling you.
You're not doing. And like I said, it's almost like a computer program. You understand what that bird is weight is, because that bird is lean. Okay. And, there's no fat, you get to that point where the bird is no, fat reserve. Somebody I just know just recently, their kestrel died. And I'm like, he told me, he says the kestrel's down 79 grams. And I'm like, that is too low. I said, that bird, I said, I believe that bird should be around 83 grams. And the bird ended up dying. And I'm just like, that bird, that was the threshold right there. I said, you kept that bird 79 grams, and that was just too low.
Yeah. No, it happens. And with smaller birds, it goes real quick too. Once they go over the plateau. But
even any bird, birds for whatever reason, like if you're a rehabber or whatever, when a bird shows up sick, it's too late. Yeah. They birds for whatever go fast. Yeah. They just like I said, you get a cat scratch.
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, within 24 hours, the bird's dead, and you're like, "Holy shit! What could I have done differently?"
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know the got scratched. That's why, to me, I'm there to protect the bird. On a cat, I don't care about the cat anymore. I mean, there was a time when I felt bad for the cat. I don't care about the cat because I know that bird could die.
Yeah.
And
no, I get it, man. No, I mean, like I said, it's a learning experience, but yeah, I mean, everybody needs to. I mean, moral to the other story too is listen to your sponsor, but yeah, for sure. But
well, it's true. Listen to your sponsor. I mean, that's what this whole program's about. You know, it's a sponsorship program. It's not like a dog or a cat where you have it as a pet.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, most people that own dogs do not teach that dog respect. Yeah. You know, they're not working dog. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, I think
nobody takes the time to properly, train a dog. That's like, we had this shepherd beagle mix, and like he would steal food, and like, I'd be like, hey, try to teach the dog not to do that. And my wife would stick up with him, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm like, hey, and all of a sudden the dog's growling at me. I mean, how many times did I have a chair and I'm backing the dog off, and it's like, look, we've got to be on the same. It's like raising children. You got to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, that's a whole other, that's a whole other situation entirely, and conversation entirely too. But unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to go ahead and wrap this up and everything. But no, I mean, this has been a great talk though. And I appreciate you, Mike, for doing this and, sharing your thoughts, and especially when it comes to the dachshunds and some of your experiences with that. I mean, you had some great stories, and like I said, I appreciate you sharing them,
Well, as I said, the best apprentices are the ones that ask for help. Okay. Mm-hmm. The ones that know it all, they're the worst ones because they don't learn anything because they think they know it all. Mm-hmm. Asking questions is a sign of intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's not to be looked down upon. Okay. Mm-hmm. You got a question to ask your sponsor, you ask your sponsor, because if you don't, you're not learning. So like, I mean, Tom Cullen lived right around the corner, and his wife probably wasn't happy with me, but I was constantly over there, and like, asking questions. You got to learn. That's the only way you're going to learn.
For sure. Yeah. So, well, like I said, thank you again so much. And, I mean, this has been a good talk, and, thanks for giving me part of your afternoon to do it.
No problem.
But okay. Yeah, we'll talk again soon. All right.